Hello, everyone. We're from Universidad Nacional de Asunción from the Instituto Superior de Lenguas, Licenciatura en Lengua Inglesa. Our study is gamification in the English classroom and action research on how it might impact on students' motivation and engagement. My name is Fernando Esquivel and this is my partner.
My name is Nathalia Figueredo. Welcome to our presentation. According to Carl M. Kapp, gamification is the implementation of game mechanics, game thinking, and aesthetics in order to engage people, motivate action, solve problems, and promote learning. According to Tribus, game-based learning is a type of gameplay with defined learning outcomes, and it involves the use of gaming principles. But gamification and game-based learning has some differences. For example, gamification occurs through the whole learning process, and game-based learning has a clear beginning and a clear end. Besides, the objective of gamification is to motivate, and the objective of game-based learning is to amuse.
The statement of the problem is the lack of motivation and engagement in the English foreign language classroom, and the research purpose is to analyze how the implementation of gamification and game-based learning impact on students' motivation, engagement, and enjoyment.
The first research question is, what are the differences regarding motivation, engagement, and enjoyment between a gamified environment and a game-based learning environment? The second question is, what is the perception students have of a gamified class and a game-based learning class?
This study made use of an hypothesis, which was the implementation of gamification in the language classroom improves students' motivation, engagement, and enjoyment compared to a game-based learning class.
Above the type of study, it was an action research, and we applied the technical and scientific vision. It was also a mixed method approach, and we used the triangulation to corroborate the results.
The variables used for these studies were the independent variables, which were gamification and game-based learning, and the dependent variables, which were motivation, engagement, and enjoyment.
Concerning the students and participants, the study took place in a private institute located in Asunción. The population was a group of 28 students. They were teenagers from 14 to 17 years old with an intermediate level of the language. The teacher in charge of the course had 6 years of experience working with students of all ages. About the data collection, there were 3 methods of data collection: survey, interviews, and class observations. The survey was adapted from a study about gamification. It was designed to measure and compare the dependent and independent variables. The interviews were conducted with 13 students selected at random, and the class observations were focused on dependent and independent variables.
Results regarding motivation. Gamification's means is 4, while GBL is 4.1. GBL standard deviation is bigger than gamification, which means that they did not impact in the same way. And the students' t-test critical value of 50% shows that differences were not significant. In the interviews, students highlighted the interaction in the class, dynamics and games, communication, competition, and challenges. Regarding class observation gamification, motivation is constant and increasing slowly. In GBL, motivation is oscillatory and not constant.
Now we have the results about engagement. The mean for gamification is 4.2, and for GBL it's 3.4, which shows a higher level of engagement in the case of gamification. The standard deviation levels are very similar, 4.97 for gamification, and for GBL 4.66. The students' t-test critical value is 42%, which shows that there isn't a significant difference. About the interview, students highlighted the use of games in the classroom, also the use of rewards and the implementation of technology. In the case of the class observations and gamification, in this system, coins and points played an important role, and students were aware of that aspect. They knew that their behavior and performance had an impact on the final results. Besides, the activities were very challenging, so it helped students to be more concentrated on their tasks. In the case of GVL, students showed higher levels of enthusiasm, and it is important to remark that these activities usually didn't have points, and which means they didn't affect their progress or grades.
Results regarding enjoyment. Out of 5 points possible, gamification mean was 4 and GBL was 4.2. GBL's standard deviation is bigger than gamification, which means that they did not impact in the same way. And the students' t-test critical value of 50% shows that differences were not significant.
Concerning the interview, students highlighted that the lessons were quite interactive and also collaboration and teamwork, and that they were able to keep track of their own scores. In the case of class observations and gamification, when COOP activities were presented, there was a lot of concentration. Students were more focused on the activities. And in the case of GBL, there was a lot of participation. Students wanted to be part of the games, and they also felt very comfortable because they were familiar with the activities presented.
Now we're reaching the conclusions. For the first question, what are the differences regarding motivation, engagement, and enjoyment between a gamified environment and a game-based learning environment? In the case of motivation, both methodologies share similar levels. However, some differences were observed when it comes to the moments and length during which gamification was noticeable. About engagement, gamification showed higher levels in comparison to game-based learning. Gamified activities kept students engaged for a longer time. Regarding enjoyment, both methodologies share similar levels. It was more difficult to observe enjoyment in a gamified activity than in game-based learning activities.
The second question was about the perception students have of a gamified class and a game-based learning class. Based on the results, both methodologies reach high scores in the survey, which means students have a favorable perception. The interviews and class observations can confirm these results. The hypothesis stated that the implementation of gamification in the language classroom improves students' motivation, engagement, and enjoyment compared to a game-based learning class. The quantitative results show that the levels of motivation, engagement, and enjoyment are very similar in both methodologies, and that the students' details show that differences were not very significant. However, the qualitative results demonstrated that gamification and GVL impact these areas in different ways.
The main purpose of this study set out to analyze how the implementation of gamification and game-based learning impact on learners' motivation, engagement, and enjoyment. It was seen that gamification and game-based learning impact positively on the three mentioned areas. Both methodologies can help to improve motivation, engagement, and enjoyment in the classroom, and they can also be combined and adapted.
About the implications for gamification, it implies a deeper comprehension of motivation, engagement, and enjoyment. A major implication is in classroom management because it becomes more democratic. Another implication is the shift of focus of the class from the teacher to the students. It's more student-centered. A downside is the amount of work because it might require more preparation and planning. And the gamification practitioner is always challenged. That's why creativity should be the main tool to overcome the obstacles that can appear in order to empower learners and give them the ownership of their own learning.
Thank you very much. We have reached the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much.